$270 million. That's the number the Toronto Raptors put on Scottie Barnes in July 2024, the largest contract in franchise history. The kind of number that takes 3 generations to earn for most families. But here's what that number doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you about a single mother working 3 jobs so her children could walk into school with their heads up. It doesn't tell you about a boy who had never known financial stability until a stranger sat him down and said, "In this house, you'll never have to worry again." And it doesn't tell you that, before any of this, Scottie Barnes wrote one sentence on his phone's lock screen and stared at it every single day: "Put myself in a position to take care of my family for the rest of my life." That wasn't motivation. That was a plan. This is the story of how he executed it. Kathleen Wilkins didn't have a safety net. When Barnes's father left, she became the only thing standing between 4 children and financial collapse. Nursing assistant during the day, security officer at night, call center shifts squeezed in between, 3 jobs, 4 kids, 1 apartment, and somehow she made it work. Barnes later said his mother sacrificed everything she had so her children could carry themselves with confidence. Not thrive, not excel, just carry themselves. That's the ceiling she was working with. What's remarkable isn't that she survived it. It's that she hit it. Even when things were rough, Barnes said. She made sure we never saw that on her face. But children see more than parents think. They see the late arrivals home, the skipped meals, the way adults flinch when unexpected bills arrive. Scottie Barnes saw all of it and absorbed every lesson without being taught a single one. They moved constantly. The parents fought before the divorce. Stability, in every sense of the word, was something that happened to other families. Not theirs. Everything changed in 5th grade. John Simpson was an AAU coach from Queens, New York, working a food distribution job in Florida and coaching youth basketball on the side. He wasn't a famous scout. He wasn't connected to a powerhouse program. He was just a man who refused to walk away from kids who needed him. He had done it once before, walked away when work got busy. Then one of his former players was killed in a gang altercation. Simpson blamed himself. He swore he would never leave again. When he saw Barnes play, he saw something worth staying for. He invited him onto his Wellington Wolves AAU team. The relationship deepened fast. Simpson trained him, took him to movies and dinners, and offered something no one had given Barnes before: consistency. By 5th grade, Barnes had moved into the Simpson family home in Wellington, a gated community that looked nothing like where he came from. The Simpsons gave him structure, meals, and routine. It was the first time Barnes understood what financial stability actually felt like, not as an idea, as a daily reality. A house where the next meal wasn't uncertain, a family where money wasn't a source of fear. Simpson told him simply, "In this house, you'll never have to worry about that again." For a child who had spent years quietly calculating, is there enough? Will it last? Those words landed differently than Simpson probably realized. That scarcity, quietly absorbed through years of watching his mother stretch every dollar, would never fully leave Barnes. But from this point forward, it would stop being a wound. It would become a weapon. Years later, when Scottie Barnes was preparing for the NBA draft, he did something simple. He opened his phone. He typed one sentence, and he set it as his lock screen. "Put myself in a position to take care of my family for the rest of my life." He looked at it every single day of his rookie season, not as inspiration, as a reminder of why he started and what failure would actually cost. Most people hear that sentence and think, ambition, drive, the kind of thing athletes say in pre-game speeches. But listen to it differently. It's not about championships. It's not about legacy. It's not even about basketball. It's about family. It's about position, financial position. It's the sentence of someone who watched their mother work 3 jobs and decided, at a young age, that he would not let that be the permanent condition of his family. Kathleen Wilkins had worked to get her children a few pairs of shoes so they could walk into school with their heads up. That was the bar she cleared with everything she had. Barnes looked at that bar and decided it wasn't the destination. It was the starting line. Basketball wasn't a passion project. It wasn't a childhood dream wrapped in highlight reels and sneaker deals. It was the most viable path out, and Barnes treated it with the seriousness of someone who understood exactly what was at stake if it didn't work. The court at the Salvation Army gym wasn't where he fell in love with the game. It was where he went to work. Every morning before school, Barnes was already on the court, not because someone told him to, not because a coach scheduled practice, because he had made a calculation that most kids his age couldn't articulate, but Barnes understood instinctively. The only resource he had was time, and every hour not spent improving was an hour wasted. Simpson saw it immediately. He didn't just train Barnes on fundamentals, he gave him a framework. Watch Magic Johnson, study the passes, understand why court vision matters more than raw scoring. Simpson wasn't building an athlete, he was building a player with a system. And Barnes absorbed it the way someone absorbs information when they understand that their entire future depends on it. The Wellington Wolves started traveling Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Texas. For a kid who had moved constantly out of necessity, he was now moving with purpose. Every tournament was a new audience. Every game was another line on a resume that was building toward one destination, the NBA. At Cardinal Newman High School, Barnes didn't ease in. He took over freshman year. 19 wins, regional semifinals, Max Prep's freshman All-American. His coach said Barnes was doing things as a freshman that juniors and seniors couldn't do. He transferred to NSU University School in Fort Lauderdale, a bigger stage, better competition, higher visibility. The results accelerated sophomore year, 36-2 record, the school's first ever Class 5A state championship. Junior year, another state title, 27-5 record, this time carrying the load after his teammate went down injured in the title game. 2 seasons at NSU, 63 wins, 7 losses, 2 state championships, 2 GEO Nationals appearances. Each trophy wasn't just a trophy. It was leverage, it was proof of concept. It was Barnes telling every scout, every coach, every decision maker in the NBA, I win, that's what I do. When a Montverde coach approached him at an EYBL Camp Montverde, the program that had beaten his team in back-to-back national championship games, Barnes's answer was immediate. He didn't want to join them. He wanted to beat them first. That's not pride, that's negotiating from strength. Barnes understood, even then, that how you arrive at a destination matters. You don't join the team that keeps beating you. You beat them. Then you join them on your own terms. He eventually transferred to Montverde. Senior year alongside Cade Cunningham. 25-0 record. Average margin of victory of 39 points. McDonald's All-American. 3 consecutive USA basketball gold medals. By the time he graduated, Barnes had built the most complete resume a high school player could construct. Not because basketball was his passion. Because he treated every season like a fiscal year, and he had not missed a single target. 1 season at Florida State was all it took. Barnes didn't follow the traditional star trajectory. Started some games, came off the bench in others, averaged numbers that didn't jump off the page. The national media was confused. His coaches were not. Barnes was there to demonstrate one thing, that he could do everything an NBA team needed. Within a system, without needing the ball in his hands to impact the game. ACC Freshman of the Year, 6th Man of the Year, same season. The only player in conference history honored as both simultaneously. Then he declared for the draft, July 29, 2021. Toronto was on the clock at number 4. Every mock draft pointed to Jalen Suggs. The basketball world had already made its decision. The Raptors had not. They called Scottie Barnes's name and the backlash was instant. Reach, wrong pick, wasted selection. But the weeks before draft night told a different story. Barnes had been training in Santa Barbara, preparing his body for the next level. One afternoon, hiking in the hills above Montecito, he stopped at a viewpoint overlooking the mansions, below Oprah's estate visible through the redwoods. He pulled out his phone and FaceTimed his mother. He pointed at the houses. One of those will be hers someday. 3 weeks later, he signed a 4-year, $33 million rookie contract with the Toronto Raptors. The boy who had watched his mother work 3 jobs to keep the lights on had just secured more money than his entire neighborhood would collectively earn in a year. The plan, the one he had been executing since 5th grade, since Simpson's house, since the Salvation Army gym had delivered its first return, $33 million. And this was only the beginning. $33 million sounds like an arrival. It isn't. Not in the NBA. A 4th overall pick who doesn't perform gets traded, gets buried on the bench, gets replaced by the next promising prospect 3 drafts later. The money guarantees nothing except opportunity, and opportunity, Barnes had learned long before he ever stepped into a professional arena, disappears if you don't treat it with urgency. He treated it with urgency. From opening night on October 20, 2021, Barnes looked like he belonged. Switching across every position in Nick Nurse's defensive system, pushing the ball in transition, making reads that rookies aren't supposed to make straight away. The positionless label that had confused scouts in college suddenly made perfect sense in Toronto's switching scheme. The numbers told half the story. 15 points, 7.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists per game. The other half lived in the details, the defensive versatility, the way he made everyone around him work harder, the competitive wiring that Masai Ujiri had spotted when Barnes mentioned the word winning 34 times in a single pre-draft interview. 34 times, not talent, not money, not fame, winning. April 23, 2022. The NBA named him Rookie of the Year, the first Raptor to win it since Vince Carter in 1999. Barnes called his mother immediately. He had kept it a surprise, told her to tune in and watch. When he showed her the trophy over the phone, she cried. "She always cries about everything that happens to me," Barnes said. "That was really special to me. It really touched my heart." Then he said something that cut through all the noise about stats and accolades and draft position debates. "Everything I worked for is for family. Not for himself, not for the Raptors, for family." The same word that had been on his lock screen all season. The same word that had been driving every early morning workout since Wellington. The $33 million had been validated. But Barnes had learned something more valuable than the money itself. He now knew what he was worth on the open market, and the market was about to confirm it in the most public way possible. The summer of 2022. Kevin Durant requested a trade from Brooklyn. Every contender in the league picked up the phone. Toronto called too. Negotiations began. Package offers were assembled. But there was one condition from the Raptors that wasn't negotiable. Scottie Barnes was not available. 1 year into his professional career, 1 year into a $33 million rookie contract, Barnes had already become the kind of asset that franchises build around rather than trade away. The Nets reportedly proposed packages that included Barnes. Toronto's answer was the same every time, not him in any negotiation. The moment you become non-tradable is the moment you understand your actual value, not the value on your contract, not the value assigned by a draft position. Your market value, what another team would give up to have you, and what your own team refuses to accept in return. Barnes had just received that information 1 year ahead of schedule. He filed it away and kept working because the money, as significant as it was, had already taught him its most important lesson. $33 million cannot be spent on comfort. Barnes's most prized possession, by his own admission, remained his PlayStation. Childhood friends stayed close. His mother, the first tangible return on years of sacrifice. But the lifestyle inflation that consumes so many young athletes who arrive at sudden wealth, Barnes seemed almost immune to it. Perhaps because he had grown up watching his mother stretch every dollar until it had nothing left to give. Perhaps because scarcity, once lived, never fully releases its grip. Perhaps because the lock screen reminder was still there every morning. Put myself in a position to take care of my family for the rest of my life. Past tense wasn't an option. The position hadn't been secured yet. $33 million was proof of concept. The real contract was still coming. July 8, 2024. Scottie Barnes signed his name to a 5-year contract extension worth $224 million with escalators that could push the total to $270 million if he meets all NBA criteria. The largest contract in Toronto Raptors history. The moment was marked by banners inside the facility reading "Future starts now." The franchise wasn't being subtle. First, the numbers. Because the numbers matter, year 1 of the extension, $38.6 million. By year 5, 2029-30, that figure climbs to $51 million annually. If Barnes makes all NBA before the contract officially kicks in, the Rose Rule language he negotiated into the deal activates. Starting salary jumps to $46.4 million. Total value reaches $269 million. Put it in context. This contract consumes 25% of Toronto's entire salary cap. In practical terms, that means every roster decision the Raptors make for the next 5 years, every trade, every free agent signing, every draft choice will be made in the shadow of this number. 25 cents of every dollar Toronto can spend is already committed to one player. That is not a contract. That is a franchise philosophy written in ink. The basketball world had opinions. NBA salary cap expert Eric Pincus graded the extension by walking down the middle. On one hand, Toronto was not paying an arrived superstar. Barnes had not yet established himself as a perennial All-NBA presence. On the other hand, the market had spoken clearly. Cade Cunningham, Franz Wagner, Evan Mobley. Barnes's own draft classmates had all received maximum contracts before fully proving themselves at the highest level. This is how the modern NBA works. Teams are not paying for what a player has done. They are paying for what they believe a player will become. The max contract is less a reward than a bet placed early, at peak uncertainty. On a future that hasn't been written yet, Toronto placed that bet on Barnes without blinking. Whether he was worth it was, at that moment, genuinely unclear. The cap experts said so. The market said so. And yet the Raptors said, "We've seen enough." Barnes, for his part, answered the pressure question directly. "I don't feel no pressure," he told TSN at the signing. "It's a huge, great responsibility, and I feel like I'm up for that. But there's no pressure at all," he continued. "I feel like this contract is just the beginning of everything. I started off my career pretty great, but now is where it really starts, I feel like, for me." Analysts parsed those words looking for bravado. They missed the more interesting explanation. When you grow up without financial stability, when you have watched your mother work 3 jobs and still come up short, a $270 million contract does not feel like pressure. It feels like proof. Proof that the plan worked. Proof that the decision to treat basketball like a business, from the Salvation Army gym, to Simpson's house, to Montverde to draft night, had returned exactly what it was supposed to return. Barnes wasn't performing calm. He was calm. Because the alternative, the version of his life where this contract never came, was the thing that had always felt like pressure. But the weight was real, even if Barnes didn't call it that. The roster being dismantled around him was not subtle. OG Anunoby traded to New York, Pascal Siakam sent to Indiana, Nick Nurse replaced by Darko Rajakovic. The veterans who had defined Raptors basketball were leaving one by one, and the franchise was being rebuilt entirely on Barnes's timeline, whether he was ready or not. Then in June 2025, the ground shifted again. Masai Ujiri, the man who had made the controversial pick at number 4, the man who had seen something in Barnes that the entire basketball world had dismissed, was fired as president of the Toronto Raptors. Bobby Webster took full control of basketball operations. The pick had outlived the man who made it. Barnes now carried something heavier than a contract. He carried the validation of a decision made by someone who was no longer there to see it through. Every game, every performance, every all-star selection was now also a posthumous argument that Ujiri had been right. That is a particular kind of weight that no number can fully capture. And then, on December 28, 2025, Barnes answered every remaining question in a single game, 23 points, 25 rebounds tying a franchise record, 10 assists, an overtime victory against Golden State. A historic triple-double that buried, once and for all, the debate about whether $270 million was too much to pay for a player without a defined position, without a reliable jumper, without the conventional profile of a franchise cornerstone. The basketball world had said, Toronto blew the pick in 2021. 4 years later, the same franchise had bet $250 million on that pick, and he was delivering. Brandon Ingram arrived in February 2025, traded from New Orleans, extended for 3 years, and $120 million. The message from the front office was unambiguous. Barnes wouldn't have to carry this alone. Toronto was building a 2-star foundation with him at the center. But make no mistake about what the $270 million represented. It wasn't a team decision. It wasn't a committee conclusion. It was a franchise looking at one player, a kid from Riviera Beach, whose mother worked 3 jobs, who had written a sentence on his phone and stared at it every day for an entire year, and deciding that everything, the entire future of the organization, would be built around him. $33 million had been the beginning. $270 million was the answer. There is a question nobody asks Scottie Barnes, not in press conferences, not in magazine profiles, not in the endless contract debates about whether $270 million was the right number. The question is this: what do you do with money when money was never the point? Barnes's answer has been quieter than most people expected. His most prized possession, by his own account, is a PlayStation. Wherever he goes, he needs 2 things: his console and a working Wi-Fi connection. He plays NBA 2K constantly, not with celebrities or influencers, but with the same rotating cast of childhood friends from Riviera Beach, broadcasting the games on Twitch to whoever cares to watch. The friends from before the money are still the friends after the money. That detail matters more than it sounds. The history of professional sports is full of athletes who arrived at sudden wealth and immediately reconstructed their entire social world around it. New friends, new entourage, new identity. Barnes moved in the opposite direction. The money changed his circumstances. It did not change his coordinates. He bought his mother a car, not a mansion, not a fleet of vehicles or a public spectacle of generosity. A car so the woman who had driven herself to 3 different jobs on 3 different schedules for years would never have to worry about how she was getting there. Small gesture, enormous meaning. This is what growing up in scarcity actually teaches you, if you pay attention. It teaches you that money is not an identity. It is a tool, and tools are only valuable if you know what you're building. Barnes had always known what he was building. The lock screen sentence wasn't about accumulating wealth. It was about position, creating a stable foundation from which his family would never again have to calculate whether there was enough. That was the goal, not the number. The security behind the number, when he won Rookie of the Year in 2022 and called his mother, She cried. Barnes said, "Everything I worked for is for family." When he signed the $270 million extension in 2024, the language he used was identical in spirit. Responsibility, not reward. Beginning, not destination. The consistency is not coincidental. It is the product of a money mindset formed in childhood and never fully overwritten by affluence. Most athletes who grow up poor go one of two directions when the money arrives. Some spend it faster than it comes, chasing the abundance they never had, filling every gap that poverty left behind. The psychology is understandable. The outcomes are well documented. Others grip it too tightly, so conditioned by scarcity that even genuine security cannot fully convince them to exhale. Barnes found a third path. He treats money the way his mother treated her paychecks, with intention. Every dollar has a purpose. Every decision has a reason. The PlayStation isn't extravagance, it's continuity. The childhood friends aren't nostalgia, they're accountability. And somewhere in Riviera Beach, a single mother who once worked 3 jobs so her children could walk into school with their heads up is no longer doing any of that. That was always the only number that mattered. $270 million, the number that started this story. The number that filled headlines, sparked debates, and defined a franchise's future. But here is what that number actually is. It is 3 jobs multiplied by years of sacrifice. It is a boy moving into a stranger's house in 5th grade because he wanted to ease his mother's burden. It is a sentence typed into a phone and stared at every single morning for an entire rookie season. It is the return on a plan that began not in a front office or a training facility, but in a Salvation Army gym, where a kid who had never known financial stability decided that he would spend every hour he had making sure his family never felt that way again. Scottie Barnes didn't just earn $270 million. He built it, brick by brick, year by year, the same way his mother built everything she had, with nothing but intention.